Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube and listening, if you're listening on the podcast, I have another special guest this week. His name is James Benoit. James, I've noticed on both Twitter and Instagram and noticed the collection that he has accumulated. And I was very interested in talking with him. So, James, first of all, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, James, you want to just go ahead and start off with when you got started collecting, and what was it that sort of made you just uh, really extremely interested in it?
So I got started. I was at a thrift shop with my dad when I was about 6 or 7, so about 92 roughly. And I very vividly still remember my first pack of cards was either 92 or 93 tops. And first the first ever card I pulled was Cal Eldred. And I'll never forget it because it was just one of those moments that you just stick with you. And ever since, I've been off and on in the hobby and collecting off and on ever since.
So, you got started around 92, and
Yep.
from the looks of it, it looks like that is where you kind of drew the most interest was those cards during that era, correct? The 90s era.
Yeah, I would say 90s until about roughly 2003. I went off to Arizona for mission work and kind of tabled everything as far as the hobby goes, which, I mean, for now, a basketball guy, then that's strictly what I collect now is 90s basketball. 2003 was kind of a rough time to stop, but yeah, I didn't get into the whole LeBron train or LeBron hype because I was off in Phoenix and California and Mexico and all over the place.
And what would you say you kind of got back into it full time?
Right around 2010, I would say. Um, I started picking up actually 5 star is what got me back in. Tops 5 star. Um, got a bunch of Drew Brees stuff and really caught fire with that. 2010 to about 2013, collected all the rare stuff that I could find out of 5 star.
All right, very cool. So, how would you best describe your collection as it is right now?
As it is right now, I would say very curated. I'm strictly 90s basketball, mostly Kobe, Allen Iverson, and Shaquille O'Neal. I was very haphazard, kind of all over the map prior to COVID, and I would say even in the 90s and 2000s when I was off and on collecting, there was no real rhyme or reason. I would grab some packs, go into the store with my parents, and just rip whatever I could find. Mostly
Mhm.
upper deck Fleer and metal in the late 90s, and that was pretty much it. We had a hobby shop, but not one that was very well stocked or user friendly. So it kind of made it a little bit rough to really streamline, and didn't really have a set vision or purpose really until I would say the last couple of years, last 2 years.
Well, and that's I totally get that. I've been down that same path
Yeah.
myself. I mean, I think I got back really heavily into it back in 2012, where in that time period, I was ripping a bunch of stuff, getting into a bunch of breaks, just enjoying ripping essentially, and then I turned my attention more towards accumulating specific players and specific inserts and rare cards. And I went through the gauntlet. I went through a lot of different things. I collected 90s stuff for a while. I collected Flair Showcase legacy cards for a while, for
Okay.
instance. I was really heavy into those legacy cards. And then I got out of them. I was really heavy into like the first few years of Panini Prism Gold refractors, and I got out of that as well. So I've been in and out a lot myself, and I feel like I think most people kind of go through those stages in their collecting of really trying to figure out what it is they really are actually most passionate about collecting. I finally figured out my sort of niche here recently as well. And so yeah, I always I think we all go through these type of cycles in our
Absolutely.
and so right now, your cycle pretty much is like you said, focused on Iverson, Kobe, and Shaq, and
Correct. Yeah.
it looks like it's pretty much like the really rare '90s inserts of those guys, correct?
Yeah, I try to stick to the rare stuff every now and then. I'll get an idea or, just a quick eBay search or, somebody's cards will pop up on Facebook or Twitter and I'll say, "Oh, hey, haven't seen that in a while," and I'll go and try to grab one. But yeah, pretty much pretty streamlined, very narrow focus. There's usually pretty wide gap now between my mail days. I for a while had tons of cards coming in the mail, and I've learned to just slow down and appreciate each individual mail day for what it is, and just like I said, streamline. And
Hmm.
I don't have a ton of extra room for accumulating a lot of cards, so usually keep it to about I would say my PC might really my entire collection, with the exception of one binder, is probably about I'd say 50 cards.
Yep, and that's good. That's kind of what I've done as well. It's kind of really consolidated down quite a bit over the years. Um, okay, so what are some of your favorites inserts then of that era? I kind of done my own sort of list of my top 10 favorite '90s inserts from that time period. So I'd be really interested to know what are some of your favorite inserts from the '90s.
So my absolute favorite, and one that I didn't even know existed at the time that I was collecting, is Fleer Ultra Stars.
Hmm.
That's pretty much it's not the rarest card I have by any means, but it just the shine, the look, and the kind of player spotlight I feel like is just can't beat it. Then I have all my PC guys in Noise Boys, which
Hmm.
is on the rarer side of things. And then I actually just recently, in a trade, half cash, half trade deal, picked up a Shaq Row Zero Legacy, and I was both shocked and very pleasantly surprised at the buy-in cost of what I had to give up to get that card, for sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah, when I did my list of my favorite '90s inserts, I had a real hard time with my top two or three. I my top two in particular. My top two were like were take it to .net from Flair, and then the Fleer tradition, the Playmakers Theater from Fleer tradition. Uh, those
Absolutely.
those are two of my favorites. Well, the Playmakers Theater in particular, just so hard to find, and you're paying a pretty premium price point for almost any of those cards from that set. So talk about what it is trying to what's it like trying to find those cards and trying to get them at a high price point that a lot of them go for now in this day and age. Because yeah, I mean, it seems like the popularity of almost all those really rare '90s inserts are still pretty high, even though we've come down in the market on a lot of other cards post COVID. But the popularity of those really rare inserts are keeping the markets for a lot of those pretty high, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I've been one of my buddies, Dominic, he jokes with me all the time and he'll say, it's kind of insane how quickly it is you're able to find these cards because, my I would say the longest wait that I've had for any card that I've been running a mad dash in search of was probably about 6 or 7 months. And I know a lot of guys in the higher end and even mid tier will chase a card for 2+ years and still not find what they want exactly and have to kind of settle. But I've been very fortunate somehow. I'm not really sure how. I mean, I search eBay, I search ComC. I'm in a couple of the '90s Facebook groups, and that's really it, to be honest. I don't really have, I feel like, the biggest network, but I feel like somehow over the course of the last few years, especially during COVID, I kind of built up an enough people that, I was able to kind of curate a really solid PC in a short amount of time.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. And so, what would be your advice to somebody who might be just really getting very heavily interested in those rare 90s inserts in terms of what would you say to them in terms of how to kind of get started if they don't have something already sort of if they don't have a PC that they can get equity from already, what would be your advice on how to get started from scratch?
For myself, so when I jumped back in I would say 2019, 2020, right, not too long before the pandemic hit, I had, and I know this can't be the case for everybody, but I went to Saints training camp, New Orleans Saints training camp in 2015. So the prize of that was a Drew Brees signed jersey, which I can't ever really see myself parting with. But I had a number of signed footballs, signed mini helmets, and a couple of just other, what I would call now, like, knickknacks. And I ended up, just my total buy-in, believe it or not, is the sales of that. And so turning that into cardboard, and then, I guess, for lack of a better word, flipping what I had, and letting that accumulate value, flipping that, and then flipping that into bigger cards to kind of what I'm sitting at now. And I I I think I'm I say think because I just this past week picked up an AI precious metal from 96. I think for the most part, I'm kind of at the end of my rope as far as the equity that I've built, the PC that I've curated, and just where I'm at now. I have kind of my PC trio in a lot of the higher end sets. There's not really anything that I'm chasing or wanting, but I guess at the end of the day, my one sentence of advice would be just be careful, be mindful, and just take your time. I think when I first got in, I was just, or I say got in, but got back in. I was chasing a lot of the bigger name guys just to have what everybody else had, and wasn't really satisfied. Wasn't really. It scratched the itch, but I wasn't. I didn't feel like I had a true handle on what my PC eventually would be. And so just take your time, really understand what it is that you're doing, and even who you're buying from. Just be careful. There's a lot of great people in the hobby, but there's a lot of people who are trying to flip, and you know I wouldn't say bad actors, but you can really dig yourself a hole trying to get into the hobby and ripping wax. I feel like that's a losing proposition these days. Um, I feel like too, there's just a lot of hobby downfalls, and I think if you find your lane and find your niche, you'll be happy. Don't try to go in chasing what everybody else has, or the shiny toy, so to speak. Just find what makes you happy, and stick with it. And I think that's the best advice I could possibly offer.
Yeah, no, it's very good advice. And yeah, I mean, when I think about the '90s insert sets, a lot of the ones that we're talking about in particular, they started in popularity with the Jordan cards in particular from each one of those sets, pretty much, and the Jordan price points shot up like crazy, probably about 10 years ago or
Yeah.
so. And a lot of the other cards in a lot of those same sets have kind of fallen suit. Not just the Kobe's, but also the Shaqs, the Iversons, the Rodmans, whoever you want to name. And so, just really keep in mind when you're going for those really rare '90s insert sets, the Noise Boys, the Playmakers Theaters, the Dunkin' Go Nuts, the Lynchpins. You know, there's a lot of there's so many great looking insert sets from that time period, but a lot of them can command quite the price point, especially as
Sure.
they've become more popular over the years, and more people, have noticed that and have decided to get into flipping them, wheeling and trading them constantly, whatever. And you really need to make sure you do your research on what are fair market values for those cards, especially if they're raw, things of that nature. And yeah, just know what you're getting into, because trying to like complete one of those insert sets can be quite the ordeal and can be very financially strenuous to try and do so.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, the the highest of the high would be, the green and red PMGs. And
Yeah.
while those while those are nice, and I 1000% appreciate, I feel like for the average, so to speak, collector, you're not going to run out and tomorrow just grab a handful of them. And when when you get yourself in a situation or collecting lane that's over your head, it can be overwhelming, and then you're trying to dig yourself out. And I know a few people who have kind of gone down that road of trying to keep up with the big guys, and it's a losing proposition. I would say, you know just stick to what you know, and if you don't know, ask. um I There were several cards that growing up I couldn't afford, or couldn't trade into, and I've been very fortunate with that as well. You know, I kind of take the approach of take it as it comes too, because I didn't really go in search of a couple of the bigger cards that I have now. I have a BGS 9 Shaquille O'Neal uh, precious metal 96, and I personally like the original precious metal more than the PMGs. And it's the player spotlight. It's silver. It's not as, I guess, flashy as the red or the green, but it's, I think, phenomenal set. And I've already over the last couple months built two of the three guys in my PC, and Kobe's going to be a tough chase. I know a lot of those are overpriced because people know what they have now, and even a, a PSA 8 or a BGS 8 will command well into the thousand, or even 2,000. Um, so it's a tough chase, but I have definitely taken the approach as I've kind of slowed down of just be mindful and take it as it comes, and just kind of not so much let it happen, because you still have to be active and be in search of the things that you want for your collection, for your PC. But things will, as you get deeper into it, kind of find their way to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, patience is a virtue, as I say, with a lot of these things. Like
Yeah.
I like to collect vintage signed basketball. Patience is definitely a virtue
Oh
when
yeah.
collecting those as well. Trying to find some of the rare ones from that era, especially. And yeah, kind of the same thing with like rare '90s inserts, because first of all, you never know when it comes to the market for some of these. Like we could see the market values for a lot of these go down significantly in
Right.
the next couple of years. Maybe not for the PMGs, but perhaps for some of these other sets. And yeah, unless you are like a Nat Turner, I really wouldn't recommend going after the PMG sets.
Right.
You know, but you probably could, if you're really patient, just find like one really awesome card in that set that you just have always wanted, if whether it's like a particular player or just having a red PMG in your collection. But don't go for the ones that are getting put on eBay that are probably going for 40% more than what they probably should go for, because once again,
Exactly.
anyone who has those kind of cards right now are going to overprice them initially, because the word is out that they all go for a lot of money. So patience is a virtue, and yeah, probably just making sure you know a lot of other people that you can trust that will very be very forward with you and say, well, look, this is probably what those cards should be going for, whether it's more or less. And having those people that you can trust that gives you that kind of information is definitely invaluable when it comes to collecting any of these type of cards.
And I would say too, when it comes to serial numbered cards, if it's a public sale, so eBay, ComC, or any searchable search engine site that keeps a tally of what things go for, then a lot of the higher end guys, if that is your lane, a lot of those guys keep tabs on that and will know, hey, you paid X for this. If you're trying to squeeze or trade up or flip, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself later on down the road, if that's your end game, is to try to flip one of those, even let's say a Ronnie Cycly red or green, especially green, PMG. People will pay a premium for it, but they'll also, if it is one of those public sales, they'll see what you paid, and the flip game kind of hits the brakes pretty quick. So again, along those same lines, just be careful and be mindful. If I would say, if the higher end is your lane and you are able to do that, I'm actually kind of thankful. I mean, I have a very good job, very solid job, but I won't allow myself to put in non-hobby money. So anything that hasn't paid me from either a card sale or trade, I won't allow myself to put in personal funds. And I know myself, and I know my want is to have things that are nice as far as my hobby PC guys go, but I also know where my cap is, given what I've kind of traded and bought into, and kind of where I sit now.
Hmm.
There is kind of, where I am now, this kind of end game of just appreciating sitting on what I was able to build. I mean, my best card up until, probably 2, 3, 4 years ago was Fernando Tatis, which oddly enough, I, kind of bought the hype on him because because we share a birthday. And I was like, that's cool. That's kind of unique. So I started building my PC of him before a lot of guys jumped in, and I was able to grab a couple of autographs, and the majority of, I guess, what I flipped of the Saints memorabilia and the Saints signings that I went to at training camp afforded me the ability to grab those Tatis at a very, very low price point. And once the market got hot and hit, I said, now's the time. Let me kind of find my lane, and I'll just sit on, this hobby stash fund that I've built, and kind of did that for a while, and just slowly but surely built to where I am now.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely, I think definitely the best way to do it for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to what you were saying too about the public auction sales, with high end cards, yeah, I think that for the most part, that's the reason why we don't see those high end cards actually go on public auction sites,
Right.
because I think a lot of people that deal in those cards don't want that information to be out there. Uh,
Correct.
and yeah, they want to actually to keep that information as close to the vest as possible. So once again, if you're thinking about getting into this, be very wary about what type of information you do find out in the public, because it could be misleading, or just could be, or if you see somebody put something out there for sale potentially with an exaggerated price point, they may be doing that to, perhaps, and I'm not saying that this is true, but perhaps manipulate the market for either that particular card or that particular set that people are going after. So there's a lot to think about when it
Right.
comes to these type of really high value cards, and cards that are really hard to obtain. And so you really think about, like what you've done, joining different groups, joining, um, like I said, getting the reaching out to different people that are already into these type of cards, and getting, if you can, some good information from these people and other sources, and not always trusting what's happening with these public auction sales.
Yeah, I think it all stems back to just, you kind of read the room and trust yourself too. Find those people that you can trust, and find those people that, you know, you feel like are a true voice in the hobby, and kind of stay close to them, and keep your ear to the ground, and you'll learn pretty quick kind of who has your best interests at heart, and who will help you kind of build and grow that PC that you're looking for, and who is kind of just there, not so much taking up space, but isn't really in the same lane as you, and
Mhm.
that's fine. The hobby definitely needs those people too, because without the flippers, a lot of these bigger cards, these cards that we want for our PCs, wouldn't shake loose. Card shows are great for getting yourself out there and kind of building a name for yourself, and letting the community that you're around kind of just see you and be seen. I've never set up at shows. I kind of like to be mostly in the shadows, and kind of just find what it is I'm after. I'll every now and then share, hey, this is incoming. I think it's pretty cool, and get some comments and whatnot and feedback on it. But for the most part, I don't say, hey, I'm looking for X, Y, or Z, because I don't want people people to know before that happens. And it's very easy to kind of get into a trap of keeping up with the Joneses. And I I really don't think that it's wise or financially smart to do that. But also, at the same time, if that is your lane and you do have that ability, then so be it. But I know for myself, and the I would say average to probably more than half the hobby is on a budget of some kind. So
Are there people on YouTube or Instagram or Twitter that you particularly like to follow or listen to, that you would recommend anyone else, um, in terms of trying to get good advice into getting into some of these cards that we're talking about?
um there's a 90s Facebook group that has been both a wealth of knowledge and really good, solid people with an eye towards helping you build what it is you're after. It's a private group, but it's about, I want to say, 35 or so thousand people, and uh, Gus does a phenomenal job of keeping the room clean, keeping people who are there for various purposes out, and really vetting the people that are in the group. And he sits on a lot of posts, and it only approves the ones that are actually legit. And Facebook can be, at least in my experience, when I was in the late 2000s, when I was getting back in after being back from Phoenix. I found there were a lot of different rooms, and a lot of groups, and you can kind of get yourself stuck in some that are not the greatest, and kind of have some seedy people in there. So that's one I stick to. As far as podcasts and hobby voices, I would say Wax Museum is great. He knows his stuff. Uh, he's he's very well spoken, and he keeps with the current, and also has an eye towards what people truly collect. And I kind of like that. It not the hobby takes many different forms, and there's plenty of voices out there. I recently he's kind of a local guy. I'm not sure exactly where he lives. Rob Gerard,
Hmm.
the hobby sports card therapist.
Yeah.
He's great too. And we've never our paths haven't crossed yet, but I kind of hope that they do somewhere along the lines. And then uh, Cousins Collectibles are kind of an offshoot, I guess, of Rob and kind of his gang. I think he calls it the Wolfpack.
Hmm.
Um, so those guys are kind of guys that I've took a liking to and a shining to most recently. But yeah, as far as hobby voices go, I think kind of decide for yourself, and kind of pick what it is that you're after. If you are an ultra modern collector and you are after prospects or the big names or the rookies of today, and you're a younger collector, then find somebody that speaks to that. And I try actually very hard to not, even though I collect very strict lane in the hobby, I try to listen to and have an ear to the ground for all the different types of content, because I think it's wise to surround yourself with people that have the same thoughts and beliefs and collection as you. But it's also kind of nice too to see, hey, this is where the hobby is headed, and what we've got going on now. I can't for whatever reason bring myself to collect modern and ultra modern, but I do appreciate and like the people that do. And it's, if you kind of stick yourself into just one area, then that's where you'll stay, and you won't get other perspectives, and kind of that leaning towards what is actually else out there. And if for whatever reason down the line I do pick up and allow myself to collect ultra modern, I'm a Pelicans fan, so from Chris Paul to um, Tyson Chandler and all those guys that we've had in between, and Zion now. I've never, Anthony Davis
Hmm.
before he left. I just, for whatever reason, never could bring myself to really genuinely PC or collect those guys, because, and I hate to, I hate to say it, but it feels like we've been kind of cursed since those David Stern, Chris Paul days of blocking that trade to LA. And if for whatever reason down the line I find myself in a position to collect a newbie, so to speak, then that having an eye towards what's going on now too is important. I am not a flipper. I wouldn't consider myself one, but I had my, I guess, moment in the sun as one, because as you're building a PC and kind of curating what it is that you have an eye on and a lean to, then there is an element of that unless you are, putting money on a credit card or have the capital to make that purchase and not really think about it. But that's not that's not me. But for the guys that do it, I I appreciate it and I get it because being able to come up with a lane and curate something that's meaningful, a lot of guys do go for the new thing, the guy who's out there scoring 50 points in a game, and everybody runs to eBay and Twitter and Facebook, and they try to drum up all their cards. And it's fascinating, but it's also like, hey, for those new guys, it's like, hey, pump the brakes a little bit, and kind of realize what it is that you're doing, and don't fall into a trap of, hey, you're gonna collect this guy just because he had a great night or two nights or handful of nights.
Right. Or don't fall into the trap of like just going on and just getting stuff that you see everyone else getting on Instagram or YouTube,
Right.
you know? uh, yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a couple of the cards, like your Shaq, precious metals. Do you have any others that you are most proud of owning right now in your collection?
I would say, going back to the Noise Boys, I would say that trio was probably the hardest for me to build. Um,
Iverson, Kobe, and Shaq. You got all three Noise Boys. You said.
yep, yep. I was able to find over the last couple months a Shaq linchpins, which I'm kind of bummed that AI for whatever reason was never in that set. So it's just the two, Kobe and Shaq, for that. Trying to think what else. Oh, hardware. The metal hardware. That's a tough set to find. It's very condition sensitive, and I picked up a PSA 6 of Shaq recently, and close your ears for everybody who likes graded. I lean towards Beckett, and have always, for whatever reason, kind of liked Beckett. I guess mostly because of growing up with the magazine, Dr. Beckett, and whatnot, and that's the slab. If I were to have one, that's what I prefer. I have had several PSA slabs. I would say, if it wasn't an eventual trade or sell down the line, I tend to crack slabs. I know that that's frowned upon by some, but I got that PSA 6 and I cracked it out and slapped it in a mag case, and I'm of the mind that, for me anyway, my OCD won't won't allow for a slab here, a mag case there. So on my work desk, I have all my mag cases set up, and then I have a couple shelves in my family room that's got all my higher end PC cards. A lot of things that I would say most mid to high end collectors probably don't do is display their stuff, but I like to actually see what it is I've worked for and been able to build. So yeah, definitely those sets. I'm right now sitting by a couple of them. I've got the Kobe Ultra Stars, the hardware, and the Legacy Shaq right here. The Shaq. So I was able to grab the Shaq. I am into it. Total buy-in was about 400, so 200 in cash and the other 200 in trade. And the only flaw on this card is on the back. There's a slight um, lift of the peel that's on the back, which I'm assuming, it's nothing that I would try to fix or play with, but I'm assuming that peel on the back of these legacies is what holds um, the blue sapphire foil and the numbering of the out of 100. So
So that
if I were to mess with that area of that card, which I'm sometimes tempted to do because it's in a mag, but the only real flaw in that card, which would probably make it a 12 to $1,500 card if it wasn't flawed. I was able to get it for a lot less than what it otherwise would be.
and you were talking about, is that from the 97 row zero set? I'm trying to remember which one you
This
had.
guy right here. I don't know if you can make it out well. The row zero.
Yeah, I think that's 97 row zero. Yeah,
Yeah. So right.
cool.
Let's see if I can kind of show it. Right by the foil, just
Mhm.
above that, there's a little peel, but it's nothing that would distract or take away from the card on the front. So it doesn't it doesn't bother me too much.
No. And do you normally prefer to keep most of them raw, for the most part, you said?
If I can find a BGS 8.5 or 9 of a PC card, and it fits
Yep.
what I've got for budget at the time, then so be it. I the two okay three. I think I have 3 graded cards that I keep in the PC right now. So the Shaq um, Precious Metals is a BGS 9. It's a quad 9. The Big Men on Court, the lenticular version of I was able to grab from ComC, is a BGS 9. And I also have the Kobe in that set, which is a BGS 9. But those are the 3 of my entire PC. Those are 3 graded cards that I have. The AI Precious Metals is a PSA 8. And when I get that, everybody says an 8 and above, don't crack it, keep it as is. But the itch will come, and I'll probably crack that out and mag it up when it comes.
Yeah, because that's another set that's very condition sensitive.
Correct.
So even getting an 8 on those cards, I know it's not always easy. So
Right.
yeah, people probably think you probably are a little crazy because
Yeah.
you probably are getting pretty good value at it being an 8.
Yeah. Yeah. And the 2 PSA 9s, which everybody kind of thinks that I'm extra crazy for. The 2 PSA 9s, which everything else that I've cracked was either SGC or PSA 8 and below, but I did have 2 PSA 9s, and they they were mostly because it was so hard for whatever reason for me to find those 2 cards. And it's a Kobe, um my takeit2.net Kobe, and also my Noise Boys Kobe. So two two of the bigger Kobe inserts into
Mhm.
PSA 9, but because all the rest of that set was raw, I decided, hey, even though this is taboo and everybody would tell me not to do this, I know that it's going to stay in the PC, and the vision for that is long term. So hopefully, if I ever were to sell those cards, I would, say, hey, these are cracked PSA 9s. I'll send you, I'll send you the sticker if you want it to prove that it was. And in my mind, the other thing with that too is, if you crack something and you're careful, then the condition in theory shouldn't change. So in my mind, it's this was a 9, but it's also still a 9. Nothing changed other than that I don't have the label on top that says this is in an approved PSA 9. And I think grading definitely holds weight and value in the hobby, especially if you're talking resale value. But for cards that I don't plan on moving,
Mhm.
then in my mind, what's the real hang up for even a PSA 9 cracking that out? I've never owned or purchased a PSA 10 because in my mind they're cost prohibitive. But if I ever were to get one, I would probably think that that would be enough to stop me from from taking the plunge and actually cracking a card like that.
Well, you're still a braver man than I am, cracking that noise voice PSA 9, especially because those die cut insert sets, ooh, they can be pretty tricky too to get a 9 or above. So
Right.
you're still a brave man for doing that. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to me today. Is there anything else you want to make sure to mention? Do you want to talk about where people can find you on Instagram or Twitter, or just any other thing you want to make sure to mention that you're looking for right now, in search of at the moment?
I would say the only card I wouldn't even say in search of, but that when it comes, when the time is right, I eventually plan on adding a Kobe Precious Metal 96 rookie.
Hmm.
I prefer a BGS 9, at the price point that they quote unquote should go for, which I think is about 11 or 1200. I think recent sales were up to maybe even 1600. But if I could find a way to build the equity to grab that, that would be nice down the line. But I'm in no rush. There's no card I feel like right now that I have to have. As far as socials go, um, good times roll underscore 85 on Twitter is where I am the most. I changed changed that from the French that it was because I figured, trying to eventually get my name out there as far as maybe even starting my own podcast down the line. It's a mouthful trying to get somebody to learn or pronounce and find a French term, but yeah, it's from the French. But yeah, good times roll underscore 85 on Twitter, and I plan on eventually probably changing my Instagram handle to the same, just so continuity is there and they match. So
Okay. Well, I'll be sure to put your information down in this description below so people
great,
can find you and check out your cards and reach out to you, hopefully, if they've got something that they think you might be interested in.
awesome.
So, yeah, James, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for the time as well.
Absolutely.